In your attempts to understand narcissism and how your life with certain narcissistic people can be impacted, you've probably come across a term that guys like me use, and it's the term gaslighting. Actually, there was a 1940s movie where a husband was doing all sorts of things to try to convince his wife that she was crazy, and that's what he was trying to succeed with. Well, when we talk about gaslighting, we refer to the narcissist's attempt to create and then maintain a sense of confusion in you about who you are and how you interpret life. Let's keep in mind that the narcissist must be in control, and they feel like they've got to be in that superior position. They've got their own alternate views of reality, and so if they can keep you in a doubting or a confused status, then that just plays right into their hand very nicely. And so, as we understand what they tend to do with the gaslighting tactic and then how you can respond to it, I'm hoping that this is going to be something that you can learn how to avoid, or at least stay out of the clutches of it. Now, before we go into all of this, I do want to make you aware of the fact that we have some resources for you. Below the video, you'll see some links. One of them is to one of my books, which is entitled When Pleasing You is Killing Me. And frankly, as you're going through this topic about gaslighting, you're going to find that book to be a very helpful one. And then another book link that we have is by Laura Carranza, and it's her book, Ugly Love. She's writing as a person who's gone through narcissistic relationships, and she's talking about it from that vantage point. And then also, if you'd like to subscribe to our network, we'd love for you to do so, and there's a link there that you can do that, and then we'll keep you apprised of new videos that come along as they pop up. Now, what kind of things can we expect from a person who uses this gaslighting technique on you? Now, let me start with an acknowledgement that the gaslighter is not an honest person. They're not honest, first of all, about who they are. It's extremely important for them to create an atmosphere with the people and the groups that they're with where they let it be known, well, I do things pretty much right almost all the time. And so they won't tell you about their flaws, they won't tell you about their strains and difficulties, and in fact they greatly exaggerate who they are and how brilliant they are. And so they may talk about successes that they've had that are wonderful successes, or if there's been a problem in their own personal history, then it's always someone else's fault. And if you were to ask them, well, what have you contributed to the downfall of various relationships, they can always come up with a rationalization to let you know it was the other person's fault. And so being dishonest about who they are sets them up to be dishonest about who you are. They do not assess life very cleanly with much objectivity at all. Now, one of the first things that these gaslighters will do is they focus on who you are, is they're constantly looking for ways to discredit you, and they'll talk into you about all of your flaws. Now, of course, one of the ways they do this is through direct criticism. I hate it the way that you handle this because I don't even think you realize how rude you are when you talk to people or when you make these decisions. You're not even considering all the things that go into the decision making. You just don't know how to do that, do you? Or whenever you engage with folks, there's just certain norms that you just don't seem to catch on to. So they're constantly looking for these kinds of things to let you know you just don't do life very well. You're pretty defective. And then to add to that, then they may go ahead and add others' interpretations, which may not be very accurate, to strengthen their argument. For example, they may say, in fact, just last week I was talking to your sister, and she doesn't want you to know, but she thinks you're crazy too. And she was telling me about how you handled this and that you just didn't get it very well. Now, you may go back later on and talk to your sister, and it's like, no, that's not how it was presented at all. But the gaslighter's going to just take anything and everything and let you know people out there, they think you're an idiot. Or you may be at a social function, and the gaslighter may speak to you afterwards and say, I don't think you realize, but when you were talking to that person over there, you were really hurting their feelings. And you're thinking, no, I thought I had a pretty good conversation with that person. And the gaslighter's like, well, think that if you will, but all I know is that person, they were kind of sulking when they left. I think you really hurt yourself and your reputation doing that. You need to watch out for stuff like that. And so there's going to be all of these interpretations about you and toward you, and then they can be ascribed to all sorts of other people who happen to have the same negatives. That's part of the crazy making. Now, it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with truth, but it's their way of saying there's plenty of things about you that are defective, and I'm just scratching the tip of the iceberg here. There's so many more, but I won't get into it. Well, then you can see that in addition to that, they'll make very broad, sweeping interpretations about you toward you. In other words, they feel like they have the right to interpret you. For example, they may say something like, you don't really show respect to people very much. And you're thinking, well, I really think I do. Or they may say something like, when you talk with some of your friends or coworkers, I don't think you see how inappropriate you are, and you come across as so bossy or so insecure or so this or so that. And so they make interpretations to you about you, and you're thinking, no, that's not the interpretation I have at all. And then their comeback to that would be, yeah, I know. You just don't see life very well. And so I'm going to just need to let you know. And so there can be all these broad, sweeping kinds of criticisms. You're not a very honest person, or you're not a very well-liked person, or you just have a way of putting people down or putting people off, and you don't even see it. Of course, I do, and you need me to keep you appraised of all of that. Well, in addition to that, if you speak to them about some of their deficiencies, for example, if you say something like, when we were talking about this project, I felt like you were being pretty critical towards me. Well, that gaslighter will just look at you like, oh, you poor soul. No, I wasn't being critical. You didn't understand things very well, and you weren't following the instructions, or you were leaving out several key things, and so I just had to set you straight. I'm not critical. It's just that you don't seem to understand how to do life very well. And so as you discuss with them what they could do to make the relationship a little bit better, they're going to just flip it right back on you, and it's like, no, you got that wrong again, and so they don't receive input whatsoever. Now, another thing, and this is huge that they tend to do, is they tend to get on the gossip train or the gossip grapevine, and will talk about you in all sorts of ways behind your back. For example, let's suppose it's someone at work that's the narcissist, and so they may go to other coworkers and say, I'm just having to work on this project with this person, and they just don't catch on. They're constantly late, or they're constantly tardy, or they just don't listen very well. Or it may be that the narcissist is inside your extended family, and so that person will go around and systematically talk to other family members. Well, y'all don't see it, but in my experience with this person, man, they have a bad temper, or they speak poorly of you behind your back, and you don't even know it, and so they'll sabotage you in those kinds of ways. And other folks are thinking, well, that's not consistent with what I see. And the gaslighter is like, yeah, I know. I see things a whole lot better than everybody else. And so they do the behind the scenes maneuvering. And then in addition to that, as you continue on and you try to let it be known, well, I want to work with you, I want to try to cooperate, they just keep coming back at you with the same old criticisms. Well, I know, but we've had this conversation 500 times and you're still not catching on. And how many times have you, in your attempt to talk with that gaslighting narcissist, felt like, we've had this conversation over and over and over, and this person keeps coming at me with all sorts of very similar sounding interpretations. And as a result, what you feel is anything that I say is going to be discounted. I'm being credited for characteristics that are not consistent with me. I'm being spoken about poorly behind my back. What does that do to you? Now, if it's me in that kind of situation, I'm going to want to pull my hair out. And I'm sure there are times that you do too. So how are you going to respond when you are up against this kind of gaslighting, where you have this very inaccurate interpretation of you that consistently keeps coming through? Now, let's keep in mind that the narcissist is a game player. And the game is to make you angry or to make you look foolish. And so if you come back at them with a whole lot of anger or agitation or blame, and say, you know, I hate it when you do this to me, or you're constantly down on my case and you're going to have to quit it, then they can come back and say, see, this is proof of what I'm talking about. You're an unstable person. And so you can't really afford to go into there. And so the first thing that I want to suggest to you is cease your efforts to try to get that person to understand your frame of reference. Because when you do try to explain to them about who you are and what you feel, all it does is it keeps the game alive, because they're always going to come back with, see, there you are again. You don't understand life. Never will that narcissist come back and say, oh, well, now that you've explained it, that makes all the difference in the world. Thanks for the input. They won't say that. So your efforts to try to set them straight are only going to keep the game alive, and your hole gets deeper and deeper and deeper. So instead of trying to convince that person, you'll need to go to your interior, and you'll need to find your own definition of who you are. If the narcissist, for example, says that you're an abrasive person or that you have anger issues, first you'll need to ask, well, what do I know about me? And if there are some things that need to be corrected, then good. That means I'm a self-aware person, and and I'm willing to address those kind of things. But then in addition to that, as you find yourself to be pleasant or serving or kind or objective or fair-minded, and if the narcissist says you're not, well, that person doesn't have the final say. You have the final say about yourself. So you're going to need to learn how to have your own separate interpretation of you, realizing that that gaslighting narcissist is not a well person, and you don't want to hand over your personal stability to someone who doesn't really understand life very well at all. Well, then that also implies another thing, and that means you're going to need to make sure that you connect with people who do get you. I've had folks come into my counseling office, and they've been gaslighted for so many different times. It's like, well, I don't know if anybody thinks well of me. Well, actually, my guess is if you've got any sense of stability and steadiness and all, if you hang out with some other folks who are of a non-narcissistic persuasion, they're probably going to appreciate that. And they're going to want to engage with you and join with you in your efforts towards decency. And so if you have friends that you can avail yourself to, and just talk out who you are to them, and then see what they think, or family members, or sometimes it's good to get the objective input from a therapist, then that can be good. But making certain that you've got a support system around you where other folks, it's like, well, maybe that narcissistic person has an opinion of you that leans in one direction, but I have an opinion of you that ultimately is much more favorable, and it's nice to be reinforced by those kind of individuals. And then another thought is by saying you may need to go towards folks who are of a non-gaslighting mindset, you may just need to start learning how to avoid the gaslighter altogether. Don't seek them out for input. Don't seek them out for opinions about who you are and how you need to engage better. They're going to lie to you anyway. And so your task is to individualize your efforts to be a healthy person. One of the things that I believe is that each one of us needs to be open to other individuals' input, because that's how we learn. But when you realize, well, that person giving me input is just nothing but a manipulator, then you need to mark them off your list. They're not going to be somebody that you're going to watch for any kind of good guidance or education about who you are and how you can engage well. So let's keep in mind that in a healthy situation, talking through your personality and your tendencies and your strengths and weaknesses with a trusted friend is a good thing to do. But when you've got somebody who has a long-standing reputation of creating confusion and looking for the negatives, then that's simply not someone that you can afford to look to for personal engagement. And so you're going to need to remove that person from your life, or at least from your sphere of influence, and individualize your efforts for you to be a healthy you. That person is not in charge of your ultimate opinion of yourself.